So, welcome everyone. My name is Edyta Bancer and I'm part of the Age Better in Sheffield team. And in today's session, we will tell you a story. So we're going to go right back to how our journey with co-production started here in Sheffield. And to enable us to be part of that story, who will be better than our very own, we're still claiming she's our very own Ruby Smith, who introduced co-production to South Yorkshire Housing Association. And in today's session, she's going to tell us how it all started. And as a very last part of today's session, I will share with you how we've grown from those early days of co-production. So we have Ruby with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Ruby can share her presentation. Over to you, Ruby.
Thanks, Edyta. Can everybody see this okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. So, hi everyone, my name's Ruby. I at my actual job at the minute is that I work at the Prince's Trust. But I've only been here for about just shy of 2 years, and before that I worked at South Yorkshire Housing Association as the head of co-design and improvement, and I led the setup of Age Better in Sheffield, along with some fantastic colleagues at SYHA, and specifically the part that I led was around the co-production. So it's lovely for me to be invited to talk about this, which is like one of my favourite topics to talk on, but it is also one that I've not talked to now for nearly 2 years since I left SYHA and since I left the Age Better in Sheffield team. So I'll apologise in advance if I'm a little bit rusty on it, but hopefully I'll be able to give you a good overview of where we started our co-production journey and some of the underlying principles of the approach that we took. And it probably will take me around about 15 minutes, I think, to talk you through that. And I'll also apologise before I start off. Sorry, I'm starting on a bad note with lots of apologies. I might be a bit rusty, and also my slides look a little bit boring because I don't work at South Yorkshire Housing Association anymore. I don't have access to those lovely slides like the one that Edyta just had up that have got a really nice Age Better in Sheffield logo and design to them. So I'm using a little bit of a boring template. So bear with me. The slides look a bit dry, but hopefully the content behind it is useful and interesting to you all. So co-producing Aging Better in Sheffield. So where we started from, right at the very beginning of our Aging Better journey, we committed that we wanted to take an approach that was really, really collaborative. And when we talked about co-production, we spent quite a lot of time really trying to nail what is it that we mean by this term. How can we make sure that this doesn't end up just being a buzzword and being something that we kind of pay lip service to? How can we make sure that it's something that's got method, rigor, integrity to it, and that is absolutely baked into the way that we deliver the whole of the Age Better in Sheffield programme? So we started off looking at kind of breaking down into a clear definition, something that was going to give us accountability, which I'll really briefly now just talk over the definition that we came to, and then I'll go into each aspect just in a little bit more detail and tell you how that played out in reality through our programme. So we broke co-production down into 4 key elements: co-design, co-delivery, co-evaluation and co-governance. So we wanted every aspect of the programme to be designed collaboratively. We wanted it to be delivered collaboratively, evaluated in a collaborative way and governed in a collaborative way. So we didn't want any aspect of decision making to be done just in isolation by us, South Yorkshire Housing Association, as an organisation, as the lead partner on the programme. But we also recognise that what it could be really easy for us to do accidentally is to start off in a really collaborative way. So to kick the programme off in a really collaborative way, to do lots of like early doors consultation and engagement, and then for us to kind of trick ourselves that was the programme co-produced. But actually we realised if we want to make sure that it is every aspect is co-produced beginning to end, we needed to kind of give ourselves a tougher definition and really kind of break it down into a bit more of a granular way. So what I'll do now is just talk through a little bit about each one of these 4 components. So we started off with co-design, and we used a scaled model of co-design. So right at the very beginning, when we were starting with a kind of blank sheet of paper on how we're going to design this programme, what's going to be in our Age Better in Sheffield delivery, we decided we need to engage with people who are over 50 who live in Sheffield, but we wanted to do that in a scaled way. So by a scaled way, what I mean is we wanted to engage with individuals one-to-one. We wanted to talk to an older person who was living in Sheffield, who was lonely and isolated, to hear their individual stories, experiences and views. But we also realised that if you only do that, you can be quite skewed by individual perceptions and kind of individual experiences. So if you just talk to, even if you talk to 100 individuals, you can be quite skewed by the bias that would naturally occur in that group of 100 people. And the reality is talking to 100 individuals is quite time consuming. So we did some engaging with people on a one-to-one level, but then we also looked at how can we scale that up. So as well as talking to people one-to-one, how can we engage with groups? So how can we engage with neighbourhoods? How can we engage with people who live in care homes? How can we engage with the younger over 50s? How can we engage with the older over 50s? So as well as talking to individuals, we started to talk to groups. And then we looked even bigger than that and thought, how can we engage with people at a big scale? So how can we engage with people at a citywide scale? And also recognise that we didn't just want the opinion of people who were over 50 who were experiencing loneliness and isolation. We wanted the opinion of people who were over 50 who weren't lonely and isolated, how they managed to avoid isolation. We wanted the opinion of family members and carers. We wanted the opinion of organisations who were supporting people. So we wanted to make sure that we were reaching individual stories, we were reaching groups, and we were reaching like a broader citywide structure as well in our approach to co-design. And then the second thing on co-design is we used a really creative approach. So we absolutely took the principle that if we try and engage people in a boring way, we'll get boring content back. So if we go to people with a survey and say, what things would you like to reduce loneliness and isolation? Would you like lunch clubs? Would you like tea dances? Would you like this? Would you like that? We'd get pretty dry and boring responses back from people, and we wouldn't really encourage people to think out of the box about what might be possible. So we did lots of creative things. We did cocktail parties in care homes. We went out on buses, touring around Sheffield. We had community journalists out and about talking to people just, on a bus, in a cafe. We did theatre productions where they were kind of interactive sessions where people could talk to us and engage with us. We did open mic nights to really engage people in a bit more of a creative way to tell us what would Sheffield look like if it was a place where nobody was lonely and isolated. So we got people to think out of the box. And we used the Moonpig principle. And I'm sure people are familiar with that awful jingle on the Moonpig advert, but the Moonpig, for anybody, I'm sure everybody knows, Moonpig, the greeting card company. And the Moonpig principle that we used is what we want to make sure that we're doing. So what Moonpig do really well is they co-design with you as their customer. They don't give you a blank card and say, here you go, create a card, a birthday card for somebody. What they do is they say, we've got a really good kind of template structure, some ideas, some colour schemes. We're expert at making cards. Here are some tips from us, but there's loads of blanks and gaps and things that need filling in, that need personalising from you. And we made sure that we did that. So we didn't go to people with a blank piece of paper and just say, make Sheffield a place where nobody's lonely, because actually we realised we'd either get what people have already got, people would think of more of the same, or people would potentially think of things that we know from a kind of professional perspective were not possible, were not doable, were not viable. So we tried to make sure we were taking a really collaborative approach where we were giving some structure giving some guidance, giving some parameters, but also making sure we left lots of big blank spaces for people to fill in, like Moonpig do when they're creating a greeting card. So that was our approach to co-design, and that absolutely shaped what went into our proposal and what we ended up delivering throughout the rest of the programme. The second part of co-production for us was co-delivery. And what we wanted to create in co-delivery is that you can't tell who a participant is effect. So if you were at an Age Better in Sheffield event or activity, that it would be unclear to you who is a beneficiary and who is a person supporting or delivering support here, because we wanted to make sure that it wasn't, to be really kind of blunt and simplistic about it. Lots of, for example, young white women delivering support to older Asian men, for example. We didn't want to have like that distinction between supporter and supported. We wanted to make it a lot more fluid and a lot more the case if you were at an event you wouldn't be able to tell who is the participant here. And we wanted to increase representation of older people both in the workforce that we're delivering Aging Better, but also through volunteering. So we knew that older people, people over 50 with experience of loneliness and isolation, or with experience of avoiding loneliness and isolation, are going to be, we were always going to be critical to being able to deliver this programme in a way that felt accessible, that felt representative, and that felt like it was owned by the people that it was for. And that was always the intention throughout. So we did that a lot through volunteering, a lot through diversifying the workforce, and increasing representation. So doing things like specifically commissioning BAME partners that we wanted to work with to increase representation of groups that we really knew we needed to target through the programme. And then a good example that we use is one of the things that we did is as part of engaging older people in the discussions around what Age Better should look like for Sheffield. We worked with Passages Theatre Company, who are an over 50s theatre company, and they did lots of like open events with us where they were delivering kind of active participatory theatre sessions where older people who were in the audience could actively participate in the theatre. So it became like this distinction between the people providing the support and the people receiving the support. The kind of boundary is really blurred there, so that there's not such a distinction. Of course there is always going to be a distinction, and I know I'm sat here as a young white woman talking about this. When I worked on this programme, of course we had lots of, there isn't, not every single person who participated in the development of this and delivery of the programme was over 50 or from a minority background, but we really wanted to make sure that we increase that representation in delivery. And then co-evaluation, I'm just checking how I'm doing for time. Okay, so co-evaluation. So when we talked about evaluating our Age Better programme, one thing we were really conscious of is that what we didn't want to do is for us as the organisations delivering the programme, for us to purely define what we thought success looked like, and then for us to measure to what extent are we reaching success as we've defined it. That just seemed so wrong and so counter to the principles of co-production. But also in our approach to co-production across the whole programme, we weren't just talking about how do we engage people who are over 50 who experience loneliness and isolation. Our approach to co-production was how do we collaborate with as many people as we possibly can, with all the right people who need to be around the table making these decisions. So one of the ways that we increased co-production on from an evaluation point of view was we did a hack lab where we brought together data experts from lots of different fields to help us understand the data around loneliness and isolation in Sheffield, which was like a really, really fascinating start to our programme. But we also set up a peer research programme, which was critical in co-evaluating. So what that did is we trained people who were over 50 the experience of loneliness and isolation. They worked with our evaluation partner at Sheffield Hallam University. Sheffield Hallam University trained them in some research skills, and then they actually actively participated in our research strategy. So they developed their own topic guides and questions, and they went out and interviewed older people who'd been on our programme to get their opinion on their feedback and on the programme. And we found absolutely that the conversations, that peer-to-peer conversation, was fundamentally different to what the kind of typical researcher participant dialogue is. So it allowed us not only to allow people who were over 50 with experience of isolation to define the questions for our evaluation, but also to ask them to evaluate the feedback that came back. And that turned really, really different results to if we alone, or we with our evaluation partner, had decided those questions and done that analysis. So it added a new dimension. And then, of course, we also, from a kind of engaging all the right people in the approach to co-evaluation, we also participated, of course, in the national and local evaluation. So we had lots of experts around that table evaluating, and that was a mix of people from national organisations, from local organisations, older people who live in Sheffield, research and data experts from Sheffield and from other areas. So we felt like we were kind of able to get a much rounder collaborative picture there for our evaluation. And then the final part on co-production for us was co-governance. And critically, what we mean by co-governance is like that the decisions on the programme, the big decisions, were made collaboratively. And so we set up our core partnership. It had an equal number of people kind of in paid roles as professionals, so people from our clinical commissioning group, people from our organisation at South Yorkshire Housing Association, people from our evaluation partners, for example, but also an equal number of people who were over 50 who live in Sheffield, who got that direct experience of being an. And so we had an equal number at an equal partnership. So every decision as a core partnership was done with all those people sitting around those table with an equal voice in that decision making. So we were commissioning, a £6 million programme, and the voice of one of the most senior people in our CCG was equal to the voice of an older person who lived in Sheffield. And that was absolutely critical. It took a lot of work in the development to make sure that was equal and fair, and that there was an equality of voice. There were lots of things we did. I could spend an hour talking to you purely about what we did to make sure that felt equal and was equal. But that was a critical thing we did on co-governance. But we also, as I said, wanted to make sure we were collaborating not just with older people, but with all of our delivery partners. So we set up a delivery partnership forum, and to engage more broadly with the sector, the voluntary and community sector across Sheffield. We held sector events where we asked for local organisations' opinions on how we're doing, what the programme should look like in the future to keep shaping it as we went forward. And of course, collaborating with the lotteries as funder. So that rounded up our approach to co-governance to make sure we've got the views and opinions of older people represented at our core partnership. Our delivery partners have got a voice, the broader sector's got a voice, and of course that we're sharing that and participating, including the lottery in that governance of the programme. So that, in a nutshell, explains our approach to co-production. The final slide I'm just going to quickly talk to is what some of the underlying principles were across all of that. So across all of that, and this is, I think, my final slide, and I think I'm about to time, we wanted to make sure that our approach to co-production was absolutely rooted in joy. So we didn't want, and part of that is because this links into the next point about reciprocity. Part of it was because we knew if we asked people questions and engaged people in a boring way, we'd get a boring response. It's just the basic economics of life. Boring plus boring equals boring. We wanted it to be joyful. We wanted it to be energetic. We wanted it to be, and one of the principles of our programme is that we wanted to challenge perceptions of ageing. So if we just did lots of things that were quite old-fashioned and stagnant. We didn't think that that was really true to the principles of our programme. So we wanted it to bring joy, which cocktail parties in care homes definitely did, as a for example. But also one of the reasons we wanted it to be joyful is the principle of reciprocity. So we were asking lots of people for lots of their time, for their opinion, for their thought, for their contribution. And we thought it's actually not fair to do that if we are not giving them something back. So actually, if we're creating a lovely event for people to participate in, which is enjoyable for them, it's a social activity, they might meet people, they might have a nice time, and we're also asking them to participate in co-producing our programme at the same time, it feels like there's some give and take there, rather than purely asking people to come and sit round a table and participate in a steering group where we get a lot from it, but actually what they get from it might be quite minimal. So reciprocity was key. Equality was key throughout it also. Like I said, particularly I think our core partnership, we wanted to make sure that we had an equality of voice, that there was good representation throughout every aspect, co-design, co-delivery, co-evaluation, co-governance, that all of that was done with, that it looked and felt like the people that it was there for. Rather than it feeling like there's a group of people here delivering and designing something for a group of people over there. We wanted it to have a sense of equality. And then the final principle that was a thread throughout it all was honesty and transparency. So I think this links back to that kind of Moonpig point, but what we wanted to make sure throughout is that our approach to co-producing Age Better in Sheffield was honest and transparent. It wasn't us kind of pretending to people that they'd got the authority to make big decisions on this programme when they actually hadn't. There were some decisions that we as a lead partner had to make, and we were really clear with people where we couldn't consult and why we couldn't consult and engage, but we were also really clear where we could, and we gave as much as we could there. And there were lots of examples of where what we initially set off thinking as a lead partner, or what we set off wanting as a lead partner, we completely changed our opinion through a process of collaborating with other people. But at the same time, we never gave anybody any kind of false expectations about what their voice or influence could do on this programme. We always challenged ourselves to maximise that without giving people any kind of false expectation, which I think is critical to being able to do one of the big things, which was one of the key outcomes of the approach to co-production, which is building trust to allow people to want to co-produce with us again in the future. So hopefully, I think I'm about on time there, and I think that should give you a good rundown to what we did, why we did it, what some of the overarching principles and underpinning themes were of our approach to co-production on Age Better in Sheffield. And I've got a slide that says questions, but I'm going to go back to editing because I'm not sure if we're going straight to questions or to something else.
Thank you, Ruby. That was fantastic. And there were some serious storytelling skills there. Thank you. Well, you are invited to ask questions, although we at 2:30, in about 6 minutes, we're going to have a few minutes break, and then I would like you, if you can, to stay to our Q&A panel when there will be plenty of opportunity to ask those questions. I'm sure you found it very interesting to listen to Ruby's stories. I certainly have, as the times when, and I was kind of picturing it in my head as Ruby was saying, the times when South Yorkshire Housing Association, Age Better in Sheffield team was trying to put the foundation of the co-production and everything. I was in a role of delivery partner for Age Better in Sheffield, and we were doing something similar on a smaller scale in our charity that was delivering one of the intervention for Age Better in Sheffield. So when Age Better in Sheffield team at SYHA was trying to understand and figure out how to do it right, we were doing the same. And it's nice to see now, 6 years later, how much we evolve from it and learn from all that work that Ruby and her team started doing at the beginning of the project. So very quick update from me now. So since then, we are now leading on the national co-production work for the National Lottery Community Fund. And just listing few things here doesn't mean we in Sheffield are expert on co-production, or it doesn't mean we completely know all the answers. Just like Sophie Proctor said in our opening session this morning, we're never going to crack it. And it's a good thing, because we always will remain curious, adventurous, and interested in looking further, hearing, listening better, and engaging with people on a deeper level. So all our delivery partners use co-production in their other services. Again, this has been touched on in previous session, that even looking at potential future bids, their expectation of co-production. So it's something that some of our delivery partners learn working with us, and now they're using it for the other services. Like Ruby said, we have used co-production with every step of our work, and all been underpinned by 5 ways to well-being. We use peer researchers to help us to tell the story of people who benefited from what we were doing. Each of our neighborhood toolkits were entirely co-produced. And when you talk of co-production and consulting and listening to those stories, you can only imagine the vast number of people we have met and how much we could learn from them. And going a step further, we use innovative tools like Gather Town, which if you had the chance to sign up to our Friday session, please do, because it's a fantastic tool. It completely blew our minds when we had the first chance to look at it, to play with it. But even though all that happened, we're still finding new ways to listen and to tell stories. Co-production never stops. Funding might stop, service might stop, but co-production doesn't. And seeing a vast amount of people attending this festival, we know people are interested in co-production. It's not just something they have to tick off because that's what funders required. It's something that gives us joy and let us better at our job, and we will continue doing it. So just to finish it off, I literally have 2 minutes. So the recording from the session will be shared with you soon. We do ask you to complete feedback on the link you will receive at some point in a spirit of test and learn. We would like to learn. Please do let us know what worked, what didn't. And any burning question at this moment in time, please do pop in a chat, and we will have a panel, the Q&A session in about 5 minutes. So we will make sure we answer those questions. And there is many more sessions over the next 3 weeks. So please do join us for those sessions, and please do share. So at the moment now, we gonna have 5 minutes break. So please have a drink, have a little stretch, and come back to us in a few minutes for our Q&A session. Thank you very much, guys. See you in a moment.
Welcome to the second part of this session. If you're just joining us, welcome. We've just heard from Ruby Smith on behalf of Age Better in Sheffield. Thank you, Ruby, for taking us through the co-production journey for Age Better in Sheffield. And Editor told us about where we are today, and Ruby started that journey way back when. So we've had a little bit of a snapshot of where things started and where things have ended up. And then the second part of the session is very much about delving into some of the journeys of the other Aging Better partners that are part of the network. So there are 14 Aging Better partners across England. If you came to the launch this morning, we've given you a little bit more insight into that. So I'm not going to share a presentation with you per se, although I did plan to, but I think Ruby very eloquently talked us through the different elements of co-production during her presentation, and looked at the different elements through co-design, co-delivery, co-governance, and and we've used so much jargon today already, and you know, we need to understand all the different sort of terminology, I guess, because there are so many different elements of that. But what I am going to do is just very quickly share, because now I have this available to me, is some of the information in our newly launched toolkit, for those of you that made the toolkit session this morning, because all of this stuff is in there. So the National Online Toolkit is the collaborative learning across the partnership, and many of the people that are on the panel today have been involved in this process of pulling the learning together and creating this amazing toolkit that we've launched the demo of today. And so there is a section in there about what is Ageing Better all about, what is Ageing Better's co-production model, and one of the things that you will have heard us talk about today, if you've been in any of the other sessions, is the test and learn approach. The Ageing Better programme's test and learn approach involves being flexible and agile in the way that we work and the services we develop. So we've had this huge flexibility to try things out and just go with it, and then adapt and bend and flex in terms of how that's been successful or not, but learning through all of that as well. And our learning just isn't about all the really lovely, fabulous stuff that we've achieved. It's also about being able to share some of those challenges with you and how we've overcome those challenges, because it is a journey. It's not just a sort of clear-cut process by any means, when you're involving lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds with lots of different thoughts and opinions. So it's how we can all blend that together and come together as one to share a common aim, and maximising the impact that we have through co-production by harnessing, as it's eloquently put there, the knowledge, wisdom and lived experience, in our case of older people, together, so we can develop our services, our projects, our activities together. So yeah, that's very much what our programme has been about through all of those different elements. And for those of you that weren't at the toolkit launch, there are lots of other sessions coming up. And these are just some of the beautiful pictures that really bring it to life. You know, what our programme's about, helping older people to lead fulfilling lives through being better connected in their communities. These are some of the activities, the lovely photographs that some of the programmes have shared, of the people that have actually been involved, and some of the activities that have come out of this process. And here's all the different partners that have been involved in that process. And yeah, so we have come together to help people in later life feel less isolated and lonely, get actively involved in their communities, engage in the design and delivery of services that improve their social connections, be recognised for their positive contribution to society, and Ageing Better use co-production to put the over 50s at the heart of everything that they do. And these are just some of the sort of statistics that have been reached. So some of the milestones, I guess, that have been achieved through the programme. Okay. So I would then like to hand over to the panel, and so we have different representation from across some of the partnerships today. We've got Dale Maskell from Age UK Cheshire, who's the lead organisation for Bright Life in Cheshire. Ruby Smith, we've already heard of course, who's here on behalf of Age Better in Sheffield in her role at the beginning. Linda Glue, who's the programme manager, Legacy and Learning in Leeds, from Time to Shine. We've got Vic Sterling, who I know you've got lots of different hats, Vic, so I get very tongue-tied when I try to introduce you, but very much head of partnerships for Age Better in Sheffield. And we've got Judith, who has been on this journey with us from the beginning on behalf of Bristol Aging Better, and has been involved in so many different ways. I'm sure she'll tell you all about that in a moment. And we've got Marianne. I'm going to pin you onto the panel because I saw you pop in. Hi, Marianne. So we've got Marianne, who's one of the community builders in Torbay as part of Aging Well Torbay. And Marianne's also been part of the steering group from the very beginning to develop the toolkit and the festival and everything else that we're doing as part of our co-production learning. So welcome, everyone. So if I could start with you, Dale, if that's okay, if you just want to do a few introductions, just to give us a bit of insight from your area.
Hi everyone, I'm Dale. I'm the Chief Exec at Age UK Cheshire, and we're the lead partner for Bright Life. So I'm sure that many of you will have met Chris and the team. My first experience of test and learn was a bit of a risky one, in that as part of the interview process for this job 4 years ago, there was an older people's panel as part of the interview process, which was brilliant, and I think was influenced by the co-production approach that Bright Life had taken. And one of the questions was around how do you engage with older people? And I decided that this was the time to test a different approach to answering that type of question. And I went into the interview and I said, I don't think it's for me to say how to engage with older people. I'd really like to hear about your experiences of good engagement. And what that taught me is that you shouldn't spring co-production on people without warming them up a little bit first. Because I think the panel just didn't know how to respond. I think there was a list of things that they expected people to come in with, and that was the process that they were used to. So yeah, a bit of a even though that was a part of the interview was a disaster, I did get the job, so that's not too bad, but it was a very steep learning curve from that point on. And then I think what we've learned and what I learned then in my role, and that's been observing and taking part in the work of the brilliant Bright Life team that we've got, was around kind of, you have to be a bit more sophisticated about co-production than just springing it on people and expecting them to know the answer to the questions, because it's about working together, isn't it? It's about kind of using people's assets. So that was my first experience. And then since then, for the last 4 years, Bright Life has been delighting and inspiring the rest of Age UK Cheshire, and we've changed how we do things quite considerably, I think, in lots of different ways, not least in the values that we have and how much we value co-production now.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Dylan, for sharing your own personal learning there as well. That's always good to know. We're all learning all the time. Vic.
Hi, yes. So I'm Vic Sterling. I'm the programme lead for Age Better in Sheffield. And I started in the role in 2017 when the programme was about 3 years in. So I think the first thing to say is I know that many of you will have heard Ruby's slot earlier, and I was able to come in and learn from and hopefully build on the brilliant practice that Ruby and the team had already established within Age Better in Sheffield. So from a personal point of view, I felt very lucky to be able to be part of that learning experience. So there was already loads of brilliant stuff going on, and yeah, a really solid foundation to build on. I thought I'd share some of the kind of the good and the bad, a bit like what Vicky was saying, because it's so easy to kind of give a nice glossy version of the good stuff that's happened and less so some of the challenges. So I'll try to balance my couple of minute reflections. So one of the areas that I reflected on was working with partner organisations on co-producing the interventions as part of what we were trying to do with Age Age Better in Sheffield. And I think there was something that I quickly learned, which was that it's really important to approach it with the right spirit. So I think it's really easy to be the professional kind of going into an organisation and saying co-production's done in this way and throwing a bit of jargon around. And it's probably the quickest way for people to really disengage with it and not want to re-engage. So there was really something about approaching it with the right spirit and about really meaningfully engaging citizens in the design and delivery of service. So that that meaningful bit was really important as well. So we didn't want to pay it lip service just to fill in some forms to say that we did it. It's better to be meaningful and not be quite right than it is to be all kind of glossy but a bit of a token gesture. The other thing that I learned, I don't know if I'm feeling a bit negative today, but I'm going to start with the stuff that didn't work so well. But I think there's something about just not being too rigid or narrow in what we thought co-production was or how it should be done as well. So just having that real openness. And I think there's something about two organisations coming together and finding their way together in how something, how a particular service should be co-produced. And I think it becomes a bit tricky if one organisation, is a bit dominant about how it should be done or a little bit too evangelical even about it. So I think there's something about being quite open in how partner organisations come together to co-produce. And then the third one was really around it being strengths-based, really. So really important to, when working with partner organisations, to honour the work that's already happened before in that organisation around co-production. Even if they didn't call it co-production, there's always, like my experience has been, there's always been a vast amount of it there. It's not a new thing, is it? And really developing on that work that's come before. So the nuts and bolts of co-production should be given the space to be authentic to that organisation and those people using those services, rather than it being kind of top down. And then one of the in my reflections, one of the things I've really enjoyed seeing over the last 3 or 4 years is where you see partner organisations using those techniques to develop and deliver other aspects of their services. So they've really kind of, they've really got it. And they've developed that approach with you, and it's for the benefit of their services. And you see them applying similar approaches across other services that they deliver outside of Age Better. And then I just add a few points on co-governance. So just to give context, we've had a partnership board for the last 6 years, and it's made up of statutory and other organisations in Sheffield, but then also people over the age of 50 with a personal or professional experience of loneliness and isolation. And this group's had oversight and direct involvement in what we funded, how the programme's being governed across this time. And many of them have been around since the beginning. And so that makes it quite a mature partnership now. But the thing I wanted to say there is my biggest reflection there is co-governance doesn't happen by chance. I don't think you just put a group of people in a room and expect that it should all just work out. So for us, it's required real careful planning and a use of a range of techniques to make sure that we get everyone's voices heard and it's delivered in a really respectful way. And that requires investment. So I think it requires both time and resources to invest in it. The other thing I've said is it can sometimes be a rocky ride, co-governance. And I think it should be on reflection, because that's about making things better, isn't it? And being able to challenge, as long as everyone's working towards the same aims. And just to finish that point and everything I'm going to say for this introduction bit is to say, I 100% believe that the impact of the co-governance, the core partnership, has made Age Better in Sheffield greater than the sum of its individual parts. So it's had a really long-lasting impact and legacy, the way that we've done that co-governance, and that's been really great for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Vic, and thanks for giving us all that insight as well. Hopefully that's really helpful. So I'm going to just pop back to Ruby now. There are a few people, Ruby, that have popped onto the second part of the session that weren't in your presentation. So if you could just maybe just introduce yourself, but also we've got a question that came up from your presentation. So I'll pose that to you as well, if that's okay.
Of course, yeah. So I'll introduce myself quickly first and then take your questions. So my name's Ruby Smith. I currently work at the Prince's Trust, where I'm a director of health and social care there. I've been there for about 2 years. Before that, I worked at South Yorkshire Housing Association as the head of co-design and improvement. And one of the biggest pieces of work that I did at SYH was working on Age Better in Sheffield and leading the co-production element of that programme, which was I think will always be one of my kind of career highlights, something that I just loved working on, and I'm very excited to be invited back to talk about it. It's like you might have to shut me up at various points because it's like a favourite topic.
Thank you, and really enjoyed your presentation as well, and hearing about what happened when you were there before most of us were here, in fact, on the Age Better in Sheffield team. So we've got a question that came up around, I guess, the initial consultation or engagement, if you like, process. When you were consulting, what was the makeup of the people in terms of where you consulted and where you engaged with people around private homeowners, extra care, independent living schemes and things like that? Sort of, is the kind of just a general makeup that you can share with us?
It's a good question. It really, really varied. So we had a really intentional approach to make sure that there was a lot of variety there. So we did, as I said, we went to lots of individuals who might have been kind of private homeowners, renters, but then we did also go to care homes, supported living schemes, extra care schemes, sheltered living as well, to make sure that we got that diversity. So I would say that there was probably quite an even split, because I think we probably did a little bit more kind of face-to-face event style engagement in group living settings, so care homes, extra care, but then we probably did a little bit more volume of work around kind of individuals who were living in their own homes or rented properties. So, and obviously just things like we kind of did more things like, while we did one-to-one interactions, conversations and events, we also did more things like surveying as well, which reached those audiences. So probably quite an even split across different groups.
Great, thanks, Ruby, and hopefully that answers your question, Dawn. If there's anything else you want to know, just let us know. So I'm going to move over to Bristol now and bring Judith into the conversation. So hi, Judith, lovely to see you.
Hi, can everybody hear me, by the way? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for me, this has been an absolute delight. I'll tell you, the last 7 years, because I've spent most of my life trying to make sure people are involved. I'm a volunteer. I'm the no longer the chair, but I'm the ambassador for Bristol People's Forum, which has got 3,000 members across the city. I'm an Age UK trustee, and I'm also the chair of Bristol Ageing Better, which is Bristol's version of the Ageing Better series. So when we started to plan it, when we first started thinking about putting in the bid, right from the beginning, I said I want older people at the heart of it, and I don't mean that lightly, I mean it really seriously. And luckily everybody else agreed, and so we looked for a steering group of people, volunteers who, like me, I'm a volunteer, who would come forward and who would help us shape the whole programme. So they were all people, a diverse group of people from Bristol, all over the place. Obviously, we knew a lot of old people already because of Bristol People's Forum and Age UK. We'd got a huge people we could send out the messages to, but we wanted people who weren't in any organisation as well. So when we got the steering group together, we formed the board. Now, the board was half professionals, as you might say, and half people like me who were just interested in the subject and knew something about the city and wanted to speak up for older people. And then we thought we need a project director. So we, like you, where is Dale? There he is. Like Dale, he had to, the person had to speak to our steering group. But we said to the steering group that what we wanted to find out what they're like as a person. What do you think of them? What do you really think? And we gave them a list of things that they might want to ask, but they could ask whatever they wanted. And so all the candidates got asked the same thing, and the views of the steering group were had the same weighting as the views of the 4 people who were interviewing, of which I was one. So we wanted to make it as equitable right from the beginning as possible. And indeed, the people who were interviewing thought one thing, and the steering group had quite strong views about that person, so that person didn't get appointed because it was their view was as important as ours. What else did we do? We've all done so many things, haven't we, over the last 7 years? It's difficult to remember everything. So let me think of something that's gone well and something that has something that went well was in an area of Lochleys, which is an area, a fairly deprived area of Bristol, and there was a little embryo organisation already. So we went to them and we said, we want to set something up to find out what people want in your area. And so they expanded it out, and they had researchers in their area, and at the end of about 6 months they came forward and said, we want this, this, this and this. So then they formed their own little groups to bring that into being. And right from the beginning I've thought so often that you don't have to have a degree to be able to decide what you like in your life. You don't have to be a professional. You just have to live there and know what's missing. And we found that people were perfectly capable of doing it, perfectly capable of having ideas, perfectly capable of expressing themselves all the way along the line. So that worked really well. And now Lochleys, which was a very deprived area, is full of activities which are still going on, which the people themselves designed and wanted. What didn't work so well? I think most things have worked pretty well. Well, when the steering group had to look at microfunding, because we did microfunding for a number of organisations, and anyone could apply. The only thing that they had to do was to have proof that they'd asked the local people in their area what they wanted. And so sometimes in the early days of the microfunding, we had to rely on the professionals who produced a form as an application, and that didn't really work because it was too professionalized, if you like. The language wasn't simple enough for somebody who's not used to filling out forms. So but that got amended, and as the steering group said, no, don't say it like that, ask them to prove that, ask them to do this. It gradually got simplified, and we had wonderful workers in Bristol Aging Better. I have to say that, wonderful workers, all of whom worked very hard to bring into being what the people themselves wanted to happen. And the program's 7 years old now. It was originally only 5 years old, but we're now in our 7th year with a very much reduced force, obviously. But I'm so proud of what we've done, so proud of the workers, and so proud of the community, because of the strengths that they found in themselves. And the proof that they've brought to the people at the City Council, that communities can think and say things for themselves. You don't have to offer them things. They will come forward. They're not averse to saying it. I'm so proud of all of that. Well, that's probably all I can say. Otherwise, I'll go on all afternoon and go on that, I'm sure. Right, next person. Vicky.
Thank you, Judith. I know how passionate you are, and it's been a pleasure working with you through the last 15 months as well. So thank you so much. So Marianne, we seem to have lost Linda from Leeds. She's dropped out, so she must be having some technical difficulties. So we'll go to Marianne, certainly not last but definitely not least. Marianne, hi.
Hi, I'm Marianne. I'm a community builder with Torbay Community Development Trust, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what we were doing before lockdown and how we've adapted our work to continue to support the community since. So in the beginning, we worked with Cormac Russell and set up the Community Development Trust with asset-based values to look at what was already there in Torbay, to always look at what is strong, not what is wrong. Torbay is a tale of two cities, deprivation alongside some very wealthy individuals. And our story is now a tale of two halves too, pre and post COVID, as it is for everyone. So our two themes for the toolkit are ABCD, asset-based community development with community builders, and co-production in a crisis. We've always worked in a creative way. At the beginning, we took sofas, tea, cake, and an exciting fold-out postcard into the high street to ask people what they wanted, not what we wanted. And half the population in Torbay is over 50. And what they wanted was to become less isolated, have a venue and purpose, and to make a contribution. So 6 years ago, when we got our funding from the lottery for an Ageing Better programme in Torbay, it was to bring older people together to reduce isolation, which is what they wanted. Half of that grant funds 18 community builders in Torbay to support mostly people over 50 in their own neighbourhoods to come together and reduce isolation. And it's led by the community, not to be a leader, but to lead from behind. We remove barriers to enable people to do what they want. It's all about listening and motivating and giving people permission to do things, creating a sense of place and a new spirit of community here. So then, of course, COVID happened, and last year, obviously, we set up the Torbay Community Helpline by March the 16th. We already had a thing called Staying Put, helping people with things to stay in their own homes, supporting them. So we used that phone number, and we were able to set it up just 1 week actually before the national lockdown. And it was for people who needed help with things like shopping, prescriptions, telephone befriending. And at that time, we began working with the helpline with Age UK, Health Watch, Torbay, Bricks and Does Care, Citizens Advice, Torbay Peer Support, and statutory services from Torbay Council and Torbay and South Devon NHS Trust. And all the community builders across Torbay immediately became part of the Healthline. So we all changed jobs overnight. We took on roles and worked around the clock in teams to make this work, taking calls on the helpline, matching over 3,500 people in need with volunteers, delivering more than 1,000 rapid response emergency shopping, food parcels and medication. We've reference checked over 1,200 volunteers now. People who need help on a regular basis have been matched by the community builders with volunteers to help with shopping, prescription collections, gardening, dog walking and telephone befriending. Some people have been shopping for people for over a year now. Just the volunteers are just amazing. We've also been supporting the Torbay Food Alliance, and this is a great co-production success story because of all this and because of our helpline. We brought all the food banks together in Torbay to work together for the first time, who have now provided 3,240 food parcels this year, 14,284 meals and 594 emergency meal kits. So as it's grown, as the helpline, it just keeps growing and growing. And we're now working with a lot of people in the Torbay voluntary community and social enterprise sector. So we're working with everyone now, really, from the Torbay Health and Wellbeing voluntary sector, Torbay Advice and Information Partnership, the Torbay Prevent Homeless Network, over 300 informal groups that are supported by us Torbay community builders, the Partnership of Neighbourhood Forums and Community Centres, Torbay Green Space Forum, and Imagine This, which is actually made up of 60 different organisations connected to young people and families. So we offer it's just expanding and expanding. So we offer support with housing now, with financial advice, bereavement, digital support, prayer and reflection, domestic abuse. We've got handy people doing handy things for people, and mental health support, of course. So in the last few weeks, adult social care, then children's services have come on board with us, plus drug and alcohol service and Devon Partnership Trust for Mental Health Services. We're all working together now so that the Torbay Community Helpline becomes the front door for anyone in Torbay who needs any help with anything. And it's all been because of co-production, because that's what we're doing now. We're all working together. And so our next challenge is to get people back out again, to bring them back together again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And yeah, the huge amount of partnership working that you've been doing over in Torbay is phenomenal. And your sessions that you're delivering for us or facilitating for us in week 2 of the festival, there's some amazing stuff coming out of Torbay. All of the stuff's amazing, but there's some very interactive, innovative sessions that are very participatory. So please do look those up on the programme. What's the title of one of them? Learning how to dance on a shifting carpet?
Dancing on a shifting carpet.
Thank you. So that just, yeah.
Oh,
so,
and ice creams and seagulls. So.
Oh yes, ice creams and seagulls. That's our live board game. So it's actually a live interactive game around well, the 2 themes that Marianne mentioned there. Thank you, Marianne. So I don't think Linda's come back in the room. So I'm going to open up. We do have some time for questions. If anyone has got any questions that they would like to put to the panel, please do write that in the chat, or just give me a wave if you've got anything that you'd like to raise. I know some people have had to leave the session, but obviously the session is being recorded as well, so we can share that with other people that haven't been able to come in. So Lynn is raising.
Hi Vicky.
Hi Lynn, nice to see you. Hear you.
Not see me, but thanks to all the panelists. I found that really interesting. Judith, I was really fascinated with some of the stuff that you were talking about in Bristol, particularly. And one of the things that struck me right at the beginning was about the number of older people that you've had involved. And I think I may have got the figures wrong, but did you say 2,000, 3,000 in the Older People's Forum in Bristol? And I just, no, it's fine. I think you're still unmuted, but I just wondered how you kept so many people engaged and how you kept so many people on board in what's obviously been a really interactive program that you've been running there.
Right. Yes, we've got 3,000 members all across Bristol. Well, lots and lots of people. I'm 82, by the way. So lots and lots of people my age are not online, and that makes things difficult. But we do have a newsletter that goes out to the people. We've got roughly 1/3 members online now, which is more than we've ever had before. So the people online got messages, obviously emails. We emailed them to ask their opinion, but the people who aren't online, we get the newsletters that go out to them. Now, postage costs a hell of a lot of money, but luckily, lately, we've got the City Council on board, so they're putting stuff that they want to put in the newsletter and paying for some of the costs. So the other way you can get in touch with people is you can have telephone chains. If quite often people living in the same area are quite happy to ring somebody up and say, have you heard so-and-so, what do you think? Have you heard so? And it goes on like that.
Okay.
Because of COVID, we can't have the public meetings that we used to have, but before COVID, we had public meetings as well, the open forums, which anybody, you didn't have to be a member to come because we don't charge for membership. So anybody could come and put their point of view, maybe what they might only want to come once, or they might want to come every time. We were fine about that either way.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know if that answers you, Lynn, or not.
No, that was that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, for the question. Thanks, Judith, for that answer there. So any other questions at all from anyone that's in the audience?
Oh, did none of you want to know? I think what it was, I think Ruby was so good with her explanation that she explained it all. That's the trouble.
Well, you've all given so much insight and so much explanation around what you've been up to as well. And sometimes it takes a little while, doesn't it, to reflect on what do I actually need to know? What's the right sort of things that I can ask? So we have literally got about 3 minutes left. So I've got a final question for everybody. Please answer it if you feel equipped and able to, because I've put you on the spot here. So what is one small thing or things that's had the biggest impact through your co-production journey? And that might be personal to you, or it might be, you know, relative to the area that you're working in or the program that you're coming from. Marianne.
Listening, I think. Yeah, I heard a great definition of this the other day on another webinar. Listening is when you're not thinking about talking.
Love it. It's true, and we did a whole session on that, the thinking environment, with Age Better in Sheffield just earlier today. Nancy Klein's Time to Think, which is all about that, and that has been sort of the core principle of the core partnership in Age Better in Sheffield. So thank you.
That was going to be my thing. I was going to say the thinking environment, and that Time to Think book I think has been, you know, particularly when you look at what our core partnership, we only actually started using that the thinking environment principles probably halfway through our core partnership, and it fundamentally changed the dynamic, and just gave such a greater sense of equality of voice, but also really created that space for people to be able to think independently, listen to each other, and not be thinking about how to respond, or, you know, just kind of having that rule of, if you're never going to interrupt somebody, if that's a base rule, you're not going to do it. It just fundamentally changes the dynamic of every conversation. So that'd be it for me.
Thank you. And the meetings, it's just a completely different environment, isn't it? Stepping into one of those meetings and having those sort of boundaries set. Fabulous. Vic.
I think I touched on it, and it's linked to what Marianne and Ruby have said, but there's just something around that approach to partnership for me, about wanting to, whether it's with an individual or an organisation, wanting to connect to do some good, and really feeling invested in that. So not trying to fast track to the point that you want to get to, but to be happy to kind of build that relationship. And I think I touched on it because, like I say, quite a lot of the partners that we've worked on in the programme and the people on the core partnership, they've been around for a long time. You know, they've been with the programme from, you know, many of them since the beginning, and they bring all that wisdom and context, and I think that's because we've formed really good partnerships with people, and we've wanted to build on that. We've really prioritised that, even though it takes time and resource.
Fantastic, thank you. Dale and Judith, so we are out of time, so just very quickly, if you want to just add your thoughts. Thank you.
I think just because something's labelled co-production doesn't mean it's co-production. I think that's one of the things that I've learned the most. And I think walking your public sector colleagues down the co-production path is a lot harder than you think it will be. And I think that's just because we value it. It seems obvious, but there's whole institutions that kind of need to change to make it a reality.
Thank you for mentioning that, and we've got a whole session talking about that very issue actually later this week, and yeah, about the kind of different mindsets. So that's great. Thanks, Dale. And Judy?
Trust. Trust people are going to do what they say and be trustworthy.
Absolutely. Trust, such a fundamental principle throughout. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for taking part, for your very full, frank and open insights into the various models across the UK. Sorry, England, I mustn't say UK because it is actually England. Yeah, so day one of our festival is actually finished now. So we're raring to go for day two tomorrow. Thank you so much to everyone that's taken part. It's been a fabulous day, and yeah, we'll start it all over again tomorrow. Take care, everybody.